Welcome to Navigating the 2019 Oklahoma School Report Card. During this session, we're going to discuss the accountability goals. We're going to connect the why, what, and what now for each of the school report card indicators. We're going to explore opportunities to access information at oklaschools.com. We're going to identify the processes of data collection and the WAVE and accountability reporting and single sign-on. We're going to explore accountability tools and resources, and we're going to identify accountability contacts. Let's start with the accountability goals. In accountability, we believe that it should be in service of the whole school, the whole child, and the whole community. These include whole child education and supports that begin with that quality early childhood development, that include effective family and community engagement, that look for results-based partnerships, expanded learning and enrichment opportunities, and of course, a positive and trust-filled and welcoming school climate. We also believe that accountability should provide accessible, meaningful, and actionable information about public schools. This is why we have the Oklahoma School Report Card dashboard. And this is our state report card that you see of all of the indicators. Each of these indicators were chosen because they align to post-secondary readiness, because our end goal is that all of our students in Oklahoma graduate with the ability to be successful in life after high school. Accountability should be integrated in a cycle of continuous improvement for schools that identifies what's working and what may be improved. We measure the outputs, but we know that there are several inputs that are also important. Things like school climate, family engagement, the implementation of the Oklahoma academic standards, facilities, and access. And when we talk about access, we're really looking at equity. Access to opportunities, access to resources, access to teachers, access to those partnerships. These are things that are not directly measured within this school report card, but they are an indirect in this system. So accountability, this is the most important one, that's why we saved it for last, is guided by the belief that all students can grow and all schools can improve. And when we have that mindset, it really does frame the way we think about things. Each of these indicators, although they're measured at different times, connect. Chronic absenteeism, you see, sits at the top of this graphic because what we know as educators is that if our kids are not at school, they can't learn. If they're not learning, they're less likely to achieve. If they're not achieving, they're less likely to graduate. So these are all connected in a way that makes sense when we think about a K-12 continuum. Now we're going to look at each of these indicators, and we're going to ask that question, why are we measuring this? What are we measuring? And what can we do with those measurements? Since chronic absenteeism sits at the top, let's start there. Why do we measure chronic absenteeism? We're really trying to mitigate lost instructional time. We're gauging school climate and student engagement. We're looking to synergize family and community engagement around the importance of school, and we're looking to identify and reduce barriers to regular school attendance. Currently in the state of Oklahoma, we have a C on this indicator. What did we measure? We measured the attendance of 664,044 students in grades K through 12. This chart is what you see on our dashboard, and it breaks it down by demographic group. This lets us know if some of our students are having more struggles attending school than others. That's a question we can ask. What other questions can we ask? We can look at trends across groups of students and grade levels, and we can connect that to the school calendar. We can identify those students that may be at risk of falling behind and the barriers that they may have to regular attendance. We can determine the effectiveness of strategies and supports in place and identify needs to fill gaps. And we can ensure that our students on IEPs and 504s have their needs identified in their plans. When we break this down by grade level, look at these trends. What we notice is that students in kindergarten have a higher rate of chronic absenteeism than students in other grades. Did you know that this higher rate of chronic absenteeism can lead to a lack of being able to read by grade 3? In grade 6, we see an uptick. Students in grade 6 are less likely to graduate if they're chronically absent. So breaking this down by grade levels helps you identify those students and think about what barriers might be in place. We also populated this by student groups. And you'll notice that economically disadvantaged students we chose because it represents 46.4% of the population. And when we look at that trend line, we do notice that across all grades, our rate of chronic absenteeism among our economically disadvantaged students is higher. Again, students with disabilities, 16.6% of our population, their rates are even higher. So we really want to go back and make sure that what's happening in their IOP plans or 504 plans is what needs to happen to support those students. And those are some first steps that we can take. Remember that when we're talking about chronic absenteeism, we're really looking to identify those barriers, the aversion, and the disengagement, because we're overcoming those myths that absences are only a problem if they are unexcused. Any missed school is a missed opportunity to learn. I was talking with a friend, and they talked about that they missed a week of school in second grade. That happened to be the week where they were learning to tell time. And she said that she still struggles reading an analog clock. So being in school and attendance matters. It could be that they have a chronic illness. It could be that there's not a safe path. It could be that they have involvement with child welfare or juvenile systems that make them not want to come to school. It could be like me. I come from an economically disadvantaged home, and my mother didn't have a very positive experience at school. It could be that they're being bullied, or it could be lack of engagement. So think about all of those things when you're looking at that chronic absenteeism indicator. And then if you need some resources, we've got them. We have a toolkit here on our website. This attendance playbook just came out from the national board, and it looks at what's most effective, and it rates those things. If you need more help in understanding this indicator, we have school report card resources, and if you're working with those students with disabilities, we also have some guidance on that. All of these are linked in the PowerPoint so that you have access to them. Now that we've talked about that, let's connect it to academic achievement. So what are we doing in academic achievement? We're really showing the improvement of a priority student group in the same grade from one year to the next. Targets were set using median baseline scores. And you'll notice when we look at these targets, and if you remember, 300 is the magic number on our OSTP scale. 300 means that students are performing proficient. This target's at 272. That's less than proficient because our students with disabilities, when we actually looked at their scores, they were scoring below that 300 target. So we used their median score to set a more reasonable or an attainable target that does increase over time. So 272, if I have a student in grade 3 that's identified as a student with disabilities, they would earn points in this indicator for scoring a 272 or higher. This is different from our previous system, and I know we've talked a lot about that. These are our priority student groups in the order in which they fell when we looked at the actual data. So in the academic achievement indicator, and what sets it apart from all of our other indicators is that students are only in one group. If a student has a disability, they're only in this group. If they don't have a disability, then we ask, are they economically disadvantaged? If they're not economically disadvantaged, then we'd ask, are they an English learner? If they're not an English learner, then we would begin to look at their race and ethnicity. Points are earned if a student meets their target but are not yet proficient. If a student meets their target and is proficient, and if a student meets their target and is advanced. So you have a range of points from 0 for not meeting your target to 0.95 to 1.25. Let's see what that looks like on the dashboard. When we looked at the dashboard, this is the graph that you see. So what are we measuring? Within this indicator, there are 338,000 students and 121 students, and they are spread across grades 3 through 8 and 11. Again, we broke down and we looked at who's scoring below their target, and in this case, this target is right around 300, who's meeting their target, who met their target and proficient, and who met their target and are advanced. You see this blue area? That's kind of the darker blue. These represent students whose targets are not yet at that proficient level. They're still earning points under this indicator because they did meet their target. And that again is something that is different from our old system and something that you saw in last year's report card. When we also look at this on the dashboard, I wanted to clarify some things because this confused me when I first looked at it, so I thought it might confuse you too. When I look at this composite, on this report card, the composite represents the percentage of points that are earned. And if I do my math here correctly, there are 45 points possible because this is a state report card, and so it encompasses science and grade in high school. So you have 15 for elementary, ELA, and math, and high school science. And you have 15 for math in grades, 3 through 8. And then you have 15 for science in high school. In grades 5 and 8, you would only have 5 points. And that may have confused you all, so I'll point you to a resource here in a moment. So if I did my math correctly, 39.1% of 45 is equal to that 17.6 points. And that's what you see here in this grid. Now then, I can also filter by subject level because I want to know what that is too. Notice that my percentage disappears here, and that when I do the math, 43.2 is not 5.4 points, because this number is really the average value earned by students meeting or exceeding their state level targets. This is based on their performance on state tests. So this is a number that ranges between 0 and that 1.25 when we talked about the points earned earlier. And I just wanted to clarify that. You'll also see that same value for math and for science. So when we're looking at academic achievement, the composite represents the percentage of points, and then the grade level represents the average value. What can we do with this data? Well, the first thing is really to know where student groups are as a whole, to identify equity gaps across student groups, to look for trends, to evaluate your curricular alignment and program coherence, to identify strengths and gaps that may exist in the curriculum and programs you have in place, to evaluate the effectiveness of your differentiation, look for needs for enhancement and/or remediation, align your needs for professional learning, connect your site and/or district level data, and compare where you are with others. We're going to take that economically disadvantaged group and we're going to break them down by grade level. We chose this group because it does represent 44.6% of our students, and most of the targets for our economically disadvantaged fall below that 300 mark. So these students can be at or above their target. They can earn between 0.95 and 1.25 points. When we look at it across the grades, you'll notice some interesting trends. In grade 3, we do have more students, 39.5% of our students meeting their targets, and 60.5% below their targets. We kind of stay, if you're looking where we have the highest, and this is for English language arts, in grade 5, 68.6% of our students are below the target. Grade 6, that improves some. So we might want to think about what's happening during that transition from grade 5 to 6. Look at high school. 44.7% of our economically disadvantaged students are scoring at or above their target. That's actually the highest rate in this whole graph. So when we think about that coherence across programs, that's what we're looking at when we break it down by this grade level. And in this case, by priority student groups. So we can think about what differentiation do we have to meet the needs of our economically disadvantaged students? What does that look like and how effective are those strategies that we're using? Here are those resources we talked about. Curriculum frameworks are a great place to look. It helps you understand what those standards look like. We also have school report card resources. If you want to know what those targets are, here's a link to the targets for this year. The Spotlight documents give you information about how each indicator has been calculated. The e-learning modules walk you through a calculation. If you're wanting help with interpreting your scores on the OSDP, we have interpretation guidebooks for ELA, math, and science. The programs of excellence rubrics are a good place to think about your instruction. And then if you need help understanding those college and career ready assessments, we put in the conversion table and the performance bands there as well. Again, each of these resources are linked within this, so you should have access to them. In conjunction with achievement, we also measure growth. Growth is looking at the same student across a continuum of learning so that we can gauge how well they're mastering key knowledge, skills, and abilities that lead to the readiness for college and career from one grade to the next. Points are earned on this one if students move within a level or move across a level, and those point values range from 0 to 200. So what was measured? Well, we have 234,919 students in this indicator across grades 4 through 8. This is what the point values look like. How you read this is I can tell that if I have a student that scored below basic low 1 year and they stayed below basic low, they're earning 0 points. Across this orange tells me that these are students that scored at the same level. Notice that if I have a student scoring at below basic high 1 year, they stay at below basic high, they're earning 90 points. You may go, why is that? Well, if we think about our standards get progressively more rigorous as we move from one grade to the next. So this is actually showing about a year's worth of growth. Are they where we want them to be? Not yet, but they're maintaining. If we had a student scoring below basic high 1 year and they move into that basic low, they're going to earn more points because they have made more progress. So in this indicator, we're looking at in the blue that they scored at a higher level. The orange, they scored at a lower level. They scored at the same level. And the gray represents that they scored at a lower level. And depending on how they moved, depends on how many points they earned. Again, on this one, it was a little tricky for me to think about this, so I thought I'd include it here. When we're looking at that composite growth score, that is the percentage of points earned. So for the state, out of that 30 points possible, we earned 58.6% of them, or 17.6 points of that 30. And that gives us that distribution of where that falls. When I filter to English or math, this is a different representation. Here, this is the average growth value between 0 and 200 earned by all phase students that had a valid assessment score. And that was the number that we saw on the previous slide, this 235,077 students. So we had an average value of 89.7. This equates to 7.7 of the 15 points available. So that's the little bit of difference between these two indicators that we thought we would share and point out. So what can we do with this data? Again, like with academic achievement, we're going to analyze trends across groups of students. We're going to consider our curriculum alignment. We're going to monitor the effectiveness of our differentiation, identify needs for enhancement or remediation, connect site and or district level data, and of course compare where we are to others within the state, because by doing that, we can ask better questions. This is what it looked like when we look at ELA growth for 2019 across those 235,000 students. The students I'd be most concerned about are these students that have been below basic low for 2 years, those 5,206 students. I'd want to know more about where they scored, how close they are to that next level, and really think about ways I can support those. On the higher end of that, our advanced high students, what are we doing to support those students as well? When we look at this, we didn't have any students that were advanced high and then fell to below basic low, so that's some good news. And when we're thinking about these trends, I'd also want to look at that by grade level if I were at a site. Here are some resources. Oh, those curriculum frameworks again. Again, those will give us some ideas of how to better understand and teach our standards. We have the academic growth performance bands, the spotlight document, the interpretation guidebooks, and the programs of excellence rubrics. These look a lot like those resources we saw for academic achievement because these indicators really do work together. One is looking at performance in a priority student group from one grade to the next, and one is looking at student progress, individual student progress between consecutive grades. ALPA. ALPA is an important indicator to measure because we're monitoring progress English learners are making towards becoming proficient in the English language. I tripped over that one, didn't I? Obviously, I'm not very proficient in the English language. Why do we do that? We're looking to determine the effectiveness of English language acquisition programs and supports in place. Did you know that when we support our English learners, they outperform all other learners? We have data that supports that right here in Oklahoma, looking at our OSDP and our Ls that are proficient. So what was measured? There's a lot being measured in this indicator. We have the proficient in a prior year, the proficient students that auto-exited, the proficient students that exited via their test scores. We have students that are still in their language acquisition programs, but they're on track, meaning that they scored where they needed to make the progress they need to exit on time. And then we have students that are not on track. And this represents the percentage of students that we had in each of those. So it looks like we have a little bit of work to do in our ELPA indicators. So what are some actions that we can take? We can know where our students are as a whole. We can analyze those trends across groups of students. We can look for strengths and gaps that may exist in the programs and supports we have in place. Again, identify needs for professional learning, connect site and district level data, and compare where we are with others. We have a team of folks here that can help you with interventions for our Ls, and we will connect those resources when I send this out. Here are the resources we have currently. Access for Ls to understand your WIDA access scores. Because if I didn't mention it, the ELS is based on the WIDA access scores. This is not based on the OSTP. Now let's move to high school. This is a high school only indicator, and it's the post-secondary opportunities. And what are we doing here? We're looking to better prepare students for life after high school. We're looking to determine how well we're supporting our students' individual and academic career plans, the ICAP, and we're looking to synergize business and community partnerships around the connections between school and work, because we want our kids to graduate ready for life after high school. What did we measure? Here we measured participation rates, and in this indicator there are 86,860 students in grades 11 and 12. Students can earn credit for post-secondary opportunities by successfully completing, meaning that they've earned a D or higher, one of the opportunities that includes AP and IB, dual or concurrent enrollment, CTE, coursework that leads to some sort of certification, or an internship. So we've expanded what that looks like so that every student can have access to something that aligns to their career path. And when we look at this graph, we want to think about why our students with disabilities are not earning credits here. And one of the things that we did when we looked at this data is we came back and we rethought how we define an internship. And you'll see some updated guidance on that on the resources that I'll show you next. But thinking about where different groups of students are, what kinds of opportunities we have, and if you're struggling with some of those, we have some resources on how to get started. So one of the first things to know is to know where your students want to go after high school so that you can connect an opportunity that has meaning to them to what they want to be. Inventory the opportunities and identify barriers to expand access. Identify needs for business partnerships, connect site and or district level data, and of course compare where you are with others, because when we compare where we are, it lets us link and leverage and expand those things that are working and mitigate those things that are not. We have some wonderful guidance here. The internship guidance that I spoke of has been updated, and an internship does encompass both paid and non-paid so that we can include those students with disabilities that had transition plan and are already on work-based learning because it's part of their transition plan. The ICAP Educator Resources is a wealth of wonderful opportunities. Accountability guidance helps you to code things correctly so that you make sure that you're getting credit for all of those opportunities that you're providing. And the first two just help you better understand this indicator. And last, the goal of all of us is to help our students graduate. So that's why we measure graduation, to monitor how well we're supporting students in graduating in 4, 5, or 6 years, to gauge the effectiveness of improvement efforts from one year to the next, and to close those equity gaps between those student groups. You'll notice on this indicator it says 60%. Our graduation rate in the state is not 60%. What this is displaying, like that composite score, is that we earn 60% of the points possible, 60% of that 10 points. And that's what that number is displaying. We're currently working on a new visualization for this that will better communicate what's happening at your school. And it will look more like this, because this is really our story. We want to see how we're supporting students in graduating first and 4 years. Some students need a little longer, so we've included 5- and 6-year graduation rates as well. And that way we can look to see how well we're supporting students in all of our groups to help them graduate, because we know that's an important milestone, and that most of the post-secondary opportunities that exist for our students will require high school and probably something beyond high school. So let's help them with that first step in graduating from high school. What do we do with this data? Analyze trends across groups of students. Is there a group that's performing less? And if so, what can we do to help them? Ensure that students are coded correctly during the DVR window, and compare where we are with others. I know that Misty was here before me talking about the adjusted cohort graduation window that's just opening, and that is also going to be available on our website so that we make sure that we have things coded correctly. That's what this guidance is for. Your historical adjusted cohort guidance is a good place to start as well, because the first thing to do is to make sure that our data is accurate. That's all of our indicators, and I know I went through them quite quickly, but I think you've heard about them before. One thing to keep in mind as you work with your data is that even though different indicators are measured at different points, they all work together to support a continuum of learning. And that's why we have chronic absenteeism that goes across K through 12, just like ELPA does. Academic achievement, we're measuring in grades 3 through 8, again in 11. Academic growth, because it's between consecutive years, we're measuring from grades 4 through 8. Post-secondary opportunities encompasses grades 11 and 12. And we put graduation with 9th because that's when students enter their cohort year. Now that we've talked about the indicators, let's look at how your data feeds in. Keep in mind that all of your data begins in some sort of wave reporting tool. It's being fed in from your local student information system. We pull that into accountability reporting. Once we've pulled it in, it's in single sign-on, so it's behind a password. Before we open any kind of opportunity, we give you an opportunity to verify that data. So the data is verified before we do any kind of calculations, and then it becomes the school report card. So it starts in the wave. We pull it into accountability reporting and single sign-on. We give you an opportunity to look at the data and say, hey, this isn't quite right during the data verification window, or this is exactly right. And then once you've verified all of that, we pull it in to run the calculations. We send another opportunity back out to see if the calculations are correct before that school report card ever is published and becomes approved by the board. So let's take a look at 2 examples. This is an example of something you'll see in the WAVE report, that October 1st Consolidated report. This is actually used for all of the indicators. It is the district certified review of all the students that are enrolled at your site on the business day nearest to October 1st. During this time, make sure that the gender, race, ethnicity, IEP 504 status, bilingual status, gifted and talented, economically disadvantaged status, and other demographic information is correct within your local student information system. That's the first place to start. If what you have in your local student information system is correct, it's feeding into this report correct, then it's going to be pulled into the accountability report correct as well. So let's look at an example of something that you do in an accountability reporting window. Something like an assessment validation. This happens in June as quickly as we can because that testing window doesn't close until May. We give you an opportunity to validate that all of the information that you have is correct. What do you look for during this time? Missing or duplicated students, review of no-score codes, and FAE values for each student that's been enrolled at your site. This is used for the academic achievement and academic growth indicators. So once you've verified this data, we'll be able to pull it into that calculation window. So those are a couple of examples of those different reports. But let's just go back and look at this once again. Your data comes in through the WAVE from your local student information system. From that, we pull it into the accountability reporting application within single sign-on. Before we do anything related to the report card, we give you an opportunity to verify that the data that's been pulled in is correct in terms of demographics, in terms of student STNs, in terms of FAE and NFAE, and other things to check for during each of those windows. Before that, once your data is verified for all of the indicators, we do run a calculation. And then we give you an opportunity to verify if that calculation is correct before it comes into the Oklahoma School Report Card. We're really excited this year that we'll have a whole year to make sure that this process goes as smoothly as possible. And we'll be doing webinars and providing more information during each of these data verification windows. So you have that to look forward to. So now that we've talked about the indicators, we've talked about where your data comes from, let's move into the actual dashboard itself. Hopefully all of you have been on this dashboard, but if you haven't, I think you're in for some surprises. I always love when things work correctly. I've got the spinning wheel.
Just hit escape. You go into your.
All right, thank you, Gary, for that technical assistance. I always like to go to the state report card. So to find the state report card, I go all the way down to the bottom, and I can click on View the State Report Card. Notice that we have an enrollment of about 700,000 students within this report card. One of the first things I'd like to show you is right here on what we call your overview page. I can filter right here by student group. We've talked a lot about economically disadvantaged. And just doing that filter lets me know how, if all of our students, how that group is performing compared to all of our other students. And I can do this for any group of students. We did have more details, and one of the things we've noticed in our analytics is that a lot of folks are going here and not digging further in. So let's go further in. And let's go with growth. So we're going to dig into academic growth. It always starts with why the indicator is important. We've looked at this visualizations, but what you may not know is that if you click on this distribution graph, and here we are at the state, we're earning 58.6%. So let's change that to English because I really want to know how we're performing in a subject area. Notice that that graph changed because remember we have points that range from 0 to 200 here. We're earning an average of 89.7. Let's go to a school that's earning a little bit more. If we click on that, it opens a modal and it shows us all the schools that are performing at that. Now then, these include middle schools, high schools, and elementary schools, but if I were at a district, I could probably look through these and find some schools that were like me, and maybe if they're doing better than I am, I might call and see what they're doing. Another cool feature, I can do this by demographics. I can look at student groups, so I can look at race, ethnicity, I can compare economically disadvantaged. When I do this, you'll notice that it changes that graphic display, and now then I can see how the economically disadvantaged students are doing compared to all students. Again, I can look to see schools that are, let's go over here. These are the highest performing schools at this 123. Oh, no schools found. So let's try this one. So we have one school that scored 112.2. So they're doing pretty well with this group of students. If I want to know more about them, I can then click into their report card, and then I can look at their demographics and think, are they like me? And that might help me to find out what's working across the state. Another feature that's maybe not as visible as it could be are these little dots. If I click on this dot, it gives me performance over time. If I were a school site, I would see my school compared to the state. And you'll see in growth, we did increase. So we moved from a 49.5% to a 58.6%. So that what that tells us is that we are growing. We may not be performing where we want to on the academic achievement indicator yet, but we are moving in the right direction. Student demographics gives me a breakdown of all of my different groups. And then this academic growth rate. We have changed this display. It is interactive. If I scroll over it, I get the numbers that you saw in the graph in the PowerPoint. What we're doing here is we're comparing performance in 2018 to performance in 2019. Remember that students that are here in the middle stayed at the same level. Students here in this orange with the minus scored at a lower level, and students here scored at a higher level. And we have this for each of our indicators. They're set out and laid out the same way, although the views may be a little different. Something that has been added that we wanted to showcase as well are contextual information. Contextual information is federally required to be part of our report card, and this includes FAE and NFAE students. So whereas the indicators on the report card are only those full academic year students, this is including all of the students. When we go to assessment performance and academic measures, we have ALPA and we have student progress. So what you'll see here is something that mirrors the indicator, but this is laid out a little differently and it includes a little different information. So let's take a look. Assessment performance, we said, why do we measure this and what was measured? Again, for the composite, this is the percentage of students that scored proficient or advanced on state tests, and I can break this down by English, math, and science. The graph is interactive here, so I could look to see schools that perform better than I did, schools that perform the same, or schools that did not perform as well. We also have the ability to look at change over time. And I'm going to show you the display here because I know this is a lot to take in. We chose a stacked bar graph here because we wanted to represent that continuum of learning. These students are scoring below basic. That's where they are in their learning. These are our basic students, these are proficient, and these are advanced. And this is for each of our SS subgroups when we look across this bottom. And you can see that we have FAE students here as well. I can change the display if I wish to and represent it this way. But we really wanted to promote that thinking that this is where students are. We don't have students that are proficient or not proficient. We have students on a learning pathway that is connected to a continuum of learning between grades K and 12. If you're a table person, you can also have that displayed in the table. I can have filters and I can look at my demographic groups in isolation as well. So this is new data that's been added for the 2019 release. In school climate, I have per pupil expenditure that will be coming. We're working on that data currently. So let's look at discipline and attendance. Again, we're looking at that rate of students that are not chronically absent, meaning that they are not missing more than 10% of a school year. If you have 165 days in your school year, that would be 16.5. If you had 180 days in your school year, that would be 18. Again, this is interactive. And this is showing that same display. This includes both FAE and NFAE students. So those are some new visualizations that are on the dashboard, and I want you to maybe think about ways that you could use that information. I get pretty excited about this distribution graph because it gives me a lot of opportunity to connect with other schools to see what they're doing, and I suspect that people are going to be connecting with you because you're doing great things as well. So this is the dashboard. Your student, of course, this is takes you to a page that gives you the OSTP information. And for that, we do have, if you're wanting to, well, let's go back to the State Department of Education. Let's look at assessment. If you haven't checked that out, it's a pretty cool place. Testing resources. I can go to the Measured Progress Help and Support site. I know this is a lot of clicks. I can look for that test coordinator information, and you'll see right here it says parent and student sample logins. Now that I have tried to copy these, but let's see if that works. And I believe the password was Oklahoma 2019 with an exclamation point. And that takes you into the parent portal. This is available to all of our parents across the state. What they need is their student's date of birth and their student's local testing number. It gives them a breakdown of how students scored. This is also interactive so that they can click in that and look at performance over time, performance by category, gives you some ideas of ways to support. It lets you see the comparison of how your student performed compared to other students, and then it gives you some other information. If I were a school district, I would help my parents access this. If you have a student moving in and you're waiting for test records, your parents can actually access those test records using this portal. So that's kind of what we have on the school report card. We have information at multiple levels, and I'm pretty excited about that. Now then, let's go back to that PowerPoint because I have a couple of other slides for you. And of course, Gary's going to come and help me.
Right down here at the bottom where that little protection
Oh,
screen
you
is.
told me that.
I may have gone ahead one. Yep.
And I did put slides in the visualizations that we just talked about because I know if you're like I am, then we went through that rather quickly, so that will be some reminders. Something else that we wanted to share with you is a tool that Dr. Tamborski's built. This is a dating tool that looks at, you can look at schools that are like you in terms of demographics and see how they scored. And so it's a matching tool. You will need to download it. It is in an Excel spreadsheet. Another exciting opportunity we want to let you be aware of is that we do have TeleEdge, which is a partnership with OSU. We meet on the second and fourth Thursday of every month from 3:30 to 4:30. We have schools that come in and tell us what they're doing that's working so that we can link and leverage those. You only need to register once to be invited to all of them, and we would love to see you there. And of course, there are no bad questions. We understand that this new school report card has some complications to it. So if you have any questions, reach out to us. That's why we're here. We love your questions, and we want to do a better job of supporting you. And with that, I think I'll close. And thank you so much for your time and your patience with my little technology struggles. I hope that you have a wonderful day, and I look forward to connecting soon.